Outside a home, a worker pushes a heavily loaded wheelbarrow up a steep metal ramp. But as the cart begins to lose momentum, gravity pulls the heavy load backward. Pushing top-heavy cargo up a steep incline creates a serious momentum control hazard. Workers must utilize mechanical lifting aids when transporting heavy materials up steep inclines. During pipeline construction, a laborer climbs into an unlined trench, unaware that the soil around him may already be close to failure. Unshored trenches are among the most unpredictable hazards in construction. As depth increases, soil pressure builds rapidly, and without proper reinforcement, the walls can collapse with little or no warning. That's why any deep excavation must be properly protected using trench boxes, shoring systems, or approved benching methods. Conditions also need constant monitoring, because soil can shift long before any visible signs appear. On a busy roadside, a person filming with a phone steps backward without checking the space behind them, moving toward the open path of nearby traffic. Using mobile devices near active roadways creates a serious distraction hazard. When attention locks onto a phone screen, awareness of the surrounding environment drops fast. That tunnel vision can prevent someone from noticing traffic movement, turning a small lapse in focus into a serious roadway exposure risk. Pedestrians must always stay fully aware near active traffic. Phones should only be used in secure pedestrian areas, well away from moving vehicles. Before stepping backward, always check the area behind you and make sure the path is completely clear. At a snowy loading dock, a spotter guides a reversing truck while standing too close to the narrowing space between the trailer and the dock. The safest spotter is one who can direct movement without entering the vehicle's path. Around loading docks, visibility is limited, engines can mask warning sounds, and gaps can close faster than expected. Once space tightens, there's often little time to react. Spotters should always guide from a clear, visible position with open space around them. Drivers should stop immediately if they lose sight of the spotter. Safe backing depends on clear communication, proper positioning, and never standing in the truck's path. At a transport yard, a driver steps into his cab as a freight truck ahead starts rolling backward into the narrow space between them. Large freight vehicles have wide blind spots, and the area directly behind them can disappear completely from view. When trucks are parked close together, even a slow reverse can quickly close gaps and leave almost no room to react. Before reversing, drivers should always confirm the full area behind the vehicle, especially in congested yards. At a confined construction site, a worker stands beneath a suspended crane bin as the rigging above quietly carries the full weight of the lift. Anytime material is hanging overhead, the space below can change from a routine work area to high-risk exposure in an instant. A small rigging issue, strap shift, or lifting imbalance can send the load out of controlled movement before anyone below has enough time to react. Workers must consistently keep clear of all active hoisting areas while loads are suspended. Spotters should maintain constant visual monitoring so no one walks beneath or near the load path during the lift. Every strap, hook, shackle, and rigging connection must be inspected carefully before the crane begins moving material. On a dirt road, a worker moves toward a rapidly spinning excavator cab as the cab rotates. A rotating excavator does not provide a safe place for a person to step in and regain control by hand. Once the cab starts spinning, the weight and speed of the machine create a powerful sweeping motion around the equipment. That movement can overpower balance, timing, and reaction speed, making any manual attempt to board or stop the machine extremely unsafe. Personnel must move away from the rotational path of uncontrolled machinery immediately. Personal safety should always come before trying to stop moving equipment by hand. Operators and crews should rely on emergency shutoff systems, remote controls, or trained response procedures whenever equipment loses normal control. At a construction site, a worker balances on narrow concrete formwork and kicks at a wooden frame while standing close to an elevated edge. Forceful movement on a narrow surface can remove stability faster than the worker expects. When a strong kick or push is made from an unprotected ledge, the body's weight can shift beyond the small support area underfoot. Workers must use stable scaffolding or properly rated work platforms before applying force to elevated materials. Fall protection systems should be properly anchored whenever work is performed near open edges or temporary framing. Heavy panels, frames, or stuck materials should be removed with controlled tools and safe positioning, not sudden force from an unstable stance. At a storefront delivery area, a worker sits atop a storage drum as the thin plastic lid begins to take on the weight it was never built to hold. A container lid may look solid, but it is usually designed to seal contents, not support a person. Plastic covers can flex, crack, or collapse suddenly when downward pressure goes beyond their safe limit. Once the surface gives way, balance can be lost immediately, especially when the container is open, unstable, or positioned inside an active work area. Workers should only use proper chairs, benches, or designated seating areas during breaks. Facility managers should clearly mark fragile containers and keep storage drums away from rest areas or walkways. On a flat industrial site, a dump truck raises its hydraulic bed to unload dirt as the elevated steel carriage begins shifting off balance. A dump truck can lose stability even when the ground appears level. As the bed rises, the load moves higher and the truck's center of weight becomes easier to disturb. Uneven soil, shifting dirt, soft ground, tire pressure differences, or material stuck in the bed can pull the raised structure sideways. Operators should place the truck on firm, compacted, level ground before lifting the bed. Tire pressure should be checked across all axles to keep support even. If the truck begins leaning during unloading, the movement should stop and the hydraulics should be lowered under control immediately. Inside an open garage, a worker steps between a tractor and a raised cargo bed while the heavy steel structure remains held above the chassis. A raised cargo bed should not be treated as secure just because the hydraulics are holding it in place. Pressure, hinges, pins, and mechanical parts can lose support without giving a clear warning first. If that support drops away, gravity takes over quickly, and the remaining clearance near the chassis can disappear with very little time to move clear. Workers should install heavy-duty support props before entering beneath any raised mechanical structure. Crews should not rely only on hydraulic pressure to hold equipment overhead. Inside a busy warehouse, a forklift enters a transport trailer just as the truck begins pulling away from the loading dock. A trailer must stay locked in place for the entire time a forklift is working inside it. If the truck moves unexpectedly, the bridge between the trailer and the dock can vanish in seconds. That sudden separation removes stable support from the dock transition and turns the trailer opening into a serious edge and drop-off risk for the equipment. Facilities should enforce wheel chocks, dock locks, and trailer restraint procedures before loading begins. Drivers must follow site rules that prevent vehicle movement until the task is complete. Dock workers, drivers, and forklift operators need clear communication before any truck moves away again. Inside a crowded retail store, a worker pulls a heavy plant cart onto a descending escalator as the moving steps begin taking control of the load. A passenger escalator is not built to control heavy rolling freight. When the cart's front wheels drop onto moving steps, the weight shifts forward and the load begins following the slope. The steep angle, rolling frame, and downward motion can quickly overpower manual control, especially when the cart is tall, heavy, or unevenly balanced. Workers should use freight elevators when moving wheeled inventory between floors. Rolling carts, plant racks, and loaded cages should stay off passenger escalators. If a load is too heavy to control safely, the task should stop. Inside an industrial facility, a worker stands in a truck bed while a suspended steel frame begins moving downward into the tight loading space. A steel frame carries stored energy the entire time it hangs from crane rigging. If a strap slips, a hook shifts, or the lift loses balance, the material can suddenly move into the loading area. In a confined truck bed, there may be very little open space to step away once the load starts moving out of position. Facility managers should keep personnel clear of loading areas while materials remain overhead. Rigging equipment, lift points, chains, and straps need inspection before every hoist. At an industrial chemical facility, two workers weld on top of a large storage tank while unseen vapors may still remain trapped inside. Hot work on a sealed tank requires full control of the atmosphere inside the vessel before the first spark. Welding heat can travel through steel and reach vapors that are not visible from outside. Without testing, cleaning, venting, and purging, pressure can build rapidly inside the container and create a dangerous release risk. Facilities should require gas clearance testing before hot work begins on tanks or industrial vessels. Crews should purge enclosed containers with approved ventilation or inert gas systems before welding starts. Permits should only be issued after the atmosphere is tested, documented, and confirmed safe by trained personnel. Outside a busy storefront, a worker pulls hard on a folding gate as weakened hinges begin losing control of the metal panels. A heavy folding gate depends on its hinges, brackets, rollers, and guide points to keep weight moving safely. If those connections are damaged or loose, pulling harder can make the structure shift suddenly instead of opening smoothly. Once the gate loses support, gravity can swing the panels into the operator's path with very little warning. Facility managers should inspect commercial gate hinges, brackets, rollers, and anchors on a regular schedule. Workers should stop using any gate that feels jammed, unstable, misaligned, or difficult to move. At an excavation site, a worker stands on the tracks of an active excavator as the rotating cab begins moving. Excavator tracks may look like a convenient place to stand, but they are not a safe work platform. When the upper structure rotates, the steel body changes position quickly and can remove a stable footing from anyone on the machine. Near an open excavation, that movement adds risk because the ground edge and machine motion are active together. Workers should stay on stable ground and remain clear of the excavator's swing path. Operators should lock the rotation and secure the machine before anyone approaches. At a fueling station, a worker reaches toward an uncontrolled rolling truck as the heavy vehicle moves closer to the concrete pump island. A moving truck carries far more momentum than a person can control by hand. Even at low speed, the weight of the vehicle can keep it rolling toward nearby pumps, structures, or parked equipment. Trying to stop it physically places the worker between moving steel and fixed objects, where the available space can close almost immediately. Personnel should move clear of uncontrolled rolling machinery and alert others nearby. Protecting personal safety should come before preventing equipment damage. Drivers should set parking brakes, use wheel chocks, and confirm the vehicle is fully secured before leaving the cab area. At a residential construction site, two workers carry a tall mobile scaffold across muddy ground as the elevated frame begins to lose its balance. A tall scaffold can become unstable when it is lifted and carried across uneven terrain. Once the base is off the ground, the structure depends entirely on the worker's grip, footing, and coordinated movement. Mud, ruts, and soft ground can cause one person to slip, slow down, or step unevenly, shifting the scaffold's weight sideways and pulling the frame out of control. Crews should dismantle tall scaffold structures before relocating them across unfinished terrain. Scaffold sections should be moved in smaller, manageable pieces using planned routes and clear communication. Inside a commercial kitchen, a worker moves a loaded pizza rack as the tall, uneven frame begins leaning sideways. A rolling rack becomes unstable when too much weight sits high on a narrow frame. Even a small turn, push, or side shift can move the load off balance if the shelving is unevenly stacked. Once the center of weight moves past the wheelbase, the rack can continue tipping faster than the operator can regain control. Workers should load rolling shelves from the bottom upward to keep the base stable. Operators should move racks slowly with both hands on the frame and avoid sharp turns or sudden side pulls. On a busy highway shoulder, a tow truck operator works beside the flatbed while passing traffic moves close to the roadside work area. Roadside recovery work leaves little margin when traffic is moving at highway speed. A small steering drift, distraction, or late lane change can bring a passing vehicle too close to the work area. Because the speed difference is high, tow operators need protective spacing, clear visibility, and positioning that keeps the recovery vehicle between them and lanes when possible. Tow operators should set buffers with cones, flares, lights, or advanced markers placed far upstream. Personnel should work from the protected side of the recovery vehicle when possible. At a rocky extraction site, a mobile crane hoists an excavator up a cliff as the machine begins lifting off balance. A crane lift becomes harder to control when the boom stretches far outward under a heavy load. The farther the load moves from the crane's center, the more leverage it applies against the counterweight and outriggers. If the boom angle, ground support, or load weight is misjudged, the crane can start losing stability and the cab can begin lifting from the surface. Operators should verify the load chart against the exact boom angle, radius, and equipment weight. Outriggers must be fully deployed on firm ground with support under each pad. Inside an industrial yard, a worker connects a heavy steel plate to an overhead crane while the rigging alignment begins pulling unevenly. A steel plate needs balanced rigging before it is lifted clear of the ground. If hooks, chains, or tension lines are not aligned correctly, the load can twist, tilt, or shift as the crane takes on weight. Even a small movement can place stress on the lifting points and cause the suspended material to move out of its intended path. Riggers should inspect hooks, chains, shackles, lift points, and tension lines before every lift. Workers should stay clear of the suspended material and avoid the load path. The crane should lift slowly so the crew can confirm the plate remains level and secure. At a highway intersection, a large transport tank contacts an elevated boom truck and transfers force into the raised bucket platform. An aerial bucket becomes vulnerable when oversized transport equipment moves through the same clearance path. If a heavy vehicle or tall load strikes the boom, the force can travel through the raised structure and disturb the platform immediately. Because the worker's position is elevated, even brief contact can create a serious stability problem with very little time for safe correction. Transport crews should verify height, width, and turning clearance before oversized machinery moves through active intersections. Two workers carry a massive pane of glass directly across a road. But before they can clear the lane, a fast-moving motorcycle makes contact with the glass. Never carry large, unflagged sheets of glass across an active roadway without proper traffic control. Transparent panes can reflect the surroundings, making the barrier difficult for approaching drivers to see. To prevent this, transport crews must meticulously mark all clear materials with high-visibility painter's tape or flags before they ever leave the staging area. Furthermore, anytime material movement intersects with a live vehicle lane, you must deploy dedicated ground spotters to actively halt traffic before the load crosses the threshold. On an elevated ramp, a worker stands in front of a silver pickup while guiding it into position. The driver's error sends the vehicle forward unexpectedly. Never stand directly in front of a moving vehicle while guiding it into position. On a narrow, elevated surface, even a small control error can send the vehicle forward unexpectedly and remove the space needed to react. Spotters should stand at a safe 45-degree angle outside the vehicle's direct path while keeping clear visual contact with the driver. Elevated ramps should use wheel stops, edge protection, and controlled alignment procedures to prevent overrun. Safe positioning and mechanical safeguards must always work together. In a freshly dug trench, a worker stays in the dig zone as an excavator removes supporting soil near a concrete wall, creating a ground stability risk. Never enter an unprotected trench or stand inside an excavation while excavation equipment is removing soil that supports nearby structures. If an excavator removes the compacted earth at the base of a concrete retaining wall, the wall can become unstable and move into the work area unexpectedly. To prevent this, crews must follow trench safety procedures by installing approved shoring, using engineered trench boxes, or properly sloping the excavation before anyone enters. At this way station, a driver reverses an overloaded three-wheeled truck onto a narrow platform. One tire slips off the edge, and the entire vehicle becomes unstable in an instant. Never, ever operate an overloaded, top-heavy, three-wheeled vehicle near the unprotected edge of an elevated platform without a spotter. When the load is stacked high, even a small drop at one wheel can shift the entire machine out of stable alignment. To prevent this, elevated weighbridges and loading platforms should be fitted with guide rails or safety curbs to stop tires from slipping off the edge. Drivers must also keep heavy loads low, balanced, and within safe limits. A narrow platform and a high center of gravity are a dangerous combination. To keep learning from these important workplace safety lessons, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Stay aware, stay safe.